drifting. That's how life can be as we're falling asleep, until it's disrupted. There's an eruption that shatters everything that used to be, waking us to a new normalcy where we're faced with two possibilities. Wish things go back to the way they were, or step forward. Recognize the opportunity to flourish, rise up, seeking the good and unity of all, letting the selfish ambitions fall, seeking the prosperity of we instead of just me. For together we rise, together we thrive, together we flourish.
Let me ask you a question. What will you say to the next generation? What will you tell their children? What will you say to the children of our children? What would you like them to say about you? One of the things I came to enjoy as a kid and as an adult was talking to my father and hearing his stories about being in the Marines, growing up in the 30s and the 40s in Brooklyn, New York. I loved hearing those stories and just kind of learning how life was then. What will you say to your children? What stories do you want them to tell? What will you say about 2020? 2020 has been a challenging year on so many levels, and we will be telling those stories. What stories will you tell? What will you say about the horrific death of George Floyd? What will you say about your experience of COVID-19? Not much of 2020 has been easy. We are doing a series now called We Flourish. We are looking at one of the most painful experiences in Israel's national identity, the exile. It was this epic moment that changed everything for them, for all of history. It changed so many things, and nothing was the same after as it was before. So many things changed when, after long years of prophecy of God's promises that if they do not turn back to him, they will lose all that he had given them. And sure enough, they did. The people, many of the people of Israel were taken away to a place called Babylon, and by their leader Nebuchadnezzar, and they were there for 70 years. But God said, I am going to bless you through this. If you will choose to seek the peace and prosperity of the city to which I've sent you, you will find your prosperity with their prosperity. We are talking about the hope that we can flourish. As we think about the name of our series, We Flourish, we can do this in one of the most difficult years that our nation has ever seen. But we might need to think a little bit differently about how we use the word we and what we mean by the word flourish. Today in particular, we are going to talk about how to deal with suffering and large scale suffering like our nation is experiencing right now. And before I get done, I hope you get these words in your head. We cannot heal unless we deal. God promises healing for us personally. God offers healing for us corporately. But it means we're going to have to deal with the pain. And what I'm hoping is I got 4 things that can teach us how to deal with the pain and walk through it. And I have what you might say an eye-popping passage for you. And seriously, I don't know if I have read a passage like this ever as a part of Project 938. So I want you to imagine, like, if you're like in a boxing ring with somebody and you're looking at somebody and they've got their and you're looking at them like you're looking at me, and you're wondering, what is he going to hit me with the right or is he going to hit me with the left? And all of a sudden you get hit with 4 fists at the same time. You're like, where did the extra 2 come from? That's how this passage comes across. So get ready, strap in, let's go. I'm reading from the prophet Joel. Joel is one of what we know as the minor prophets, not because they're young. Their books were just a little bit shorter. He has 3 chapters in the Old Testament, and he ministered to God's people who were in Jerusalem after many of the people were taken in exile to Babylon. All right. So last week we talked about Jeremiah, who went with the, who taught the people who were in Babylon from Jerusalem. Joel in here is speaking to an epic event that happened on top of the exile to the people of Israel. The word of the Lord that came to Joel, son of Pethuel. Hear this, you elders. Listen, all who live in the land. Has anything like this ever happened in your days or in the days of your ancestors? Tell it to your children, and let your children tell it to their children, and their children to the next generation. What will you say to your children? What the locust swarm has left, the great locusts have eaten. What the great locusts have left, the young locusts have eaten. What the young locusts have left, other locusts have eaten. Wake up, you drunkards, and weep. Wail, all you drinkers of wine. Wail because of the new wine, for it has been snatched from your lips. A nation has invaded my land, a mighty army without number. It has the teeth of a lion, the fangs of a lioness. It has laid waste my vines and ruined my fig trees. It has stripped off their bark and thrown it away, leaving their branches white. Mourn like a virgin in sackcloth, grieving for the betrothed of her youth. Grain offerings and drink offerings are cut off from the house of the Lord. The priests are in mourning, those who minister before the Lord. The fields are ruined. The ground is dried up. The grain is destroyed. The new wine is dried up. The olive fails. Despair, you farmers. Wail, you vine growers. Grieve for the wheat and the barley, because the harvest of the field is destroyed. The vine is dried up, and the fig tree is withered. The pomegranate, the palm, and the apple tree, all the trees of the field are dried up. Surely the people's joy is withered away. Put on sackcloth, you priests, and mourn. Wail, you who minister before the altar. Come spend the night in sackcloth, you who minister before my God. For the grain offerings and drink offerings are withheld from the house of your God. Declare a holy fast. Call a sacred assembly. Summon the elders and all who live in the land to the house of the Lord your God, and cry out to the Lord. Joel asked them, what are you going to tell your children about what has happened? And what happened? He's speaking very literally about a locust plague that hit the nation. And he talked about 4 different kinds of locusts that came. What the cutting locust left, the hopping locust ate. What the hopping locust left, the swarming locust ate. And what the swarming locust ate, the rest of the locusts came in. And we don't know if he's speaking literal or figurative, but these things happen in the Near East. And there's no reason why we wouldn't expect that this is exactly what happened to Israel, that a swarm of locusts came in after they had been exiled and came and just ate up all the crops. And there was almost nothing left. Just this epic event that just took all their crops away and made them hungry for at least an entire year. What were they going to do? I want to walk us through 4 things. Remember, we cannot heal unless we deal. The first thing is we need to awaken. The passage says, awake. Wake up. Whenever there is an event of this magnitude, what he was describing, the first people he addressed were those who were drunk, the ones who were running away from the pain, who were escaping the pain, who are trying to stay away from it and trying to avoid maybe even the consequences of this. And he's just like, come on, wake up. Do you realize what has happened? Can you look at the suffering around you? Can you see it? Whenever we have experienced something of just great proportion, sometimes it takes us a while to catch on to what was going on. I know that was the case for a lot of us with COVID-19. I had been at a large conference 10 days before the country started shutting down. And then I was at a large tournament. I was with groups of thousands and thousands of people, and I recognized that there was a problem. But it was when the NBA shut down their season. They said, wait a second, we're looking at something like we've never seen before. And it kept growing. But it was that thing, the NBA and then the NHL shutting down. I said, wait a second. I woke up and I started realizing this is a big deal. When I was a young man in college, my mom was battling cancer, and she had had a solid year. She had a solid year of remission. But I remember after I went to school, I was at the University of Delaware as a freshman. I was home one weekend. My sister pulled me aside and she said, you know, Mom is out of remission, right? And you know she's not going to win this, right? And it was like this, it was this thing that woke me up. And from there, once I awakened to the oncoming loss of my mother, it changed my behavior, and it started the process of grief for me. With George Floyd's horrific death, it has awakened us. It has awakened us to experience and to think about the African American experience in ways that some of us have been unwilling to consider and think about. And all of us are experiencing it differently, but it has awakened us to an issue that is much bigger than we've realized. And we're realizing, regardless of what racial background, all of us in some ways have been complicit with this ongoing injustice. When I was a part of Celebrate Recovery, I learned the capacity of the human heart to avoid anything that would make us feel uncomfortable, and how the human heart, how we would find different ways to avoid, and how denial becomes this thing we use to escape from pain. 2,500 years ago, 2,600 years ago, with Joel, people used drink to escape. We do it today. We use Netflix. I haven't been able to use sports to escape, but there's ways we escape from the things that we don't want to think about or feel. And Joel calls people to awaken, to look at it. And he says, don't you see, the vines are gone. The figs are gone. There's not going to be any wine for you. There's no way for you to escape what is true. And look at the trees. The bark has been removed from the trees, and that means they are going to begin to die. Yes, they look green now, but the bark is removed. They are going down as well. I think before 2020, one of the things that was always bubbling under the surface, as far as one of these things our nation has needed to awaken to, is the unbelievable struggle that we have with mental health. Statistics say, and from the National Association of Mental Illness, is that 50% of all Americans will experience a mental illness, a bout of anxiety or depression somewhere in their lifetime. And at any given time, at least 20% of all Americans are struggling with either depression, anxiety, or some sort of mental illness. This is a normal thing. This means that in the size of an average family, somebody in every average family is going to be struggling with mental illness. And yet it just seems to be this thing that we can't talk about. If you're new to Project 938, I hope you know that we do talk about this. And if mental illness has been a part of your story, either your life or your loved one, I hope you will feel comfortable to talk about it. You don't have to talk about it right away, but when you get there, please know that this is something we talk about. It has to be something we talk about. It has to be something we awaken to. This world is hard, and it's hard on us. And unless we can talk about these very real struggles, unless we awaken to them, we can't deal with it. So the first point is we need to awaken to these things. Then once we awaken to them and we can speak to them and we can bring them out into light, then we have a path to healing. The second thing is to lament. In this passage, the word is translated mourn. in verse 8. In fact, he says, mourn like a virgin in sackcloth. What he's saying is, when you look at your country, mourn like a woman who's just lost her fiance to war. Mourn like somebody who had all these hopes and all these hopes dashed. And Joel models the lament. He uses words, he describes things over and over. He uses artistic poetry, and he describes, this is what I've lost, and this is what it's mean. This is what it's meant to have lost. The grain offerings and the drink offerings are cut off. The fields are ruined. The ground is dried up. The grain is destroyed. He used articulate words because processing these things out loud are the way we separate them from us. It's how we bring separation, we bring perspective to it. It's how we begin adjusting to a new normal. Unless we express our grief, the grief stays within us. And this affects everything. I know for me, through difficult seasons, I've read the Psalms. About a third of the Psalms are laments. God's people talking about how they struggle. In the last two major crises in the United States, and after 9/11 and the economic downturn, I found myself going back to Bruce Springsteen. He just knows how to tell a story, a sad story. And what it did for me is he would tell the stories of others who went through the pain of those moments. And as I connected my heart to those stories, I was able to empathize with their stories. And as I was able to connect to others in their stories, it relieved the pain of myself. His words gave me words that I wasn't able to articulate myself. Music, songs, psalms, art. We use these things to process what we experience. Now, if you're paying attention, you might be saying, this sounds like a terrible idea. I mean, why did I even join this broadcast in the first place? This is like such a downer. I was hoping to feel a little bit better today, and I'm hoping you will by the end. But you just need to know, I agree with you. I agree with you. All the personality profile tests on Marc Lucenius on me says, this guy thinks about things that are sad for about a second and then moves on. Man, I can live into the future. I can say, oh, that was hard. Let's go think about the next thing. I know how to skip past a difficult moment and emotionally get into the next because it feels better there. But I also know what it's like when all those skip moments pile up. They pile up and then they enter into everything because I've got ungrieved difficulties and pain that has piled up. And next thing you know, I'm not just managing the next moment, I'm managing all these other moments that I haven't dealt with that have piled up into my heart, and I'm an emotional wreck, not because of the specific moment I'm in, but because I'm carrying all this other stuff that I haven't dealt with. If you're like me and you do this, I think the reason why we move to the next moment or find a way to not have to deal is because I think sometimes we can be afraid of being sad, and afraid that if we become sad, we won't become unsad. See, what you're seeing in Joel is in the Hebrew mind and the ancient world, they had ways to deal with sadness. They had structures. They had things like sackcloth, this like a very itchy like shirt you would wear to remind yourself of the pain. They would hire mourners. They had these structures in place in their society to help people deal with the many, many griefs that they would experience. Mourning was a part of life. That's why they had particular songs they would sing. I mean, death was much more prevalent, much more in their face. People died young so much more often. And so they learned how to deal with grief. They had societal structures. Our society does not have the structures we need. Our society keeps saying, you could be happier if you buy my product. You can have your best life right now. And we always have another shiny thing to get onto. And because there's always a shiny thing, we think that maybe that it really is true. That we can skip past the difficulties of the pain and the mourning, and we can just kind of continue to go to the next thing. And so we keep going to that next thing, and we keep looking for the next Instagram-worthy moment, and then we keep pursuing, we keep jumping past it. But when we fill these gaps that are meant to enable us to recover and to heal and to reflect, we lose something. We lose the time for reflection, connection, conversation, and emotional recovery. We need to build those things back into our lives if we're going to be healthy and strong. Think of the emotions in terms of physical fitness. I've had a couple of things where I've had to go to physical therapy over the years, and the reason why is that I either injured something because of overuse or I injured something through some sort of dramatic thing. But the truth of the matter, whether it was my ankle or my shoulder, we'll use my ankle for one example. If I continued to walk on my ankle, I would have caused more problems for it. And so I had to go to physical therapists. And that's true for a lot of us when it comes to our emotions. We've experienced dramatic things that have happened to us emotionally, and we haven't had the ability to process ourselves, and so we go to a pro. And I've had counselors help me through difficult seasons, and help me process things. But we need to think of our emotions a little bit more like our body. Like, it's not that we deal with ourselves emotionally like you go to a physical therapist. We also need to stay physically fit. You don't go to a physical therapist to stay fit. You need to be doing something every day. We need all sorts of things. We're always trying to take one step further with our diet or some kind of exercise. Fitness is a daily thing when it comes to our physique, but it's also for us emotionally. We need to have the kind of structure in place to manage the painful things we experience emotionally, whether that's creating space, Sabbath, rest, conversations. But we need to be willing to do it. I think there's two reasons why we don't commit to emotional health and rest and recovery from the sad things of life. Well, I think there's two ways we do it. We like busyness. Whether it's more ambition, more work, or another Instagram-worthy moment, we go to that next thing. Or I'm just not willing. And in the difficulties of life, we turn towards self-pity rather than God. I want to read a passage from a contemporary of Joel, prophet Hosea, speaking to those who are grieving himself. He says, "They do not cry out to me from their hearts, but wail on their beds. They slash themselves appealing to their gods for grain and new wine, but they turn away from me." I think in the difficulties of life, it's tempting to stay in our bed and just wail and cry, but we don't cry out to God. And sometimes it's because we were worshiping something else and the true God didn't give us that thing. And because the true God in his love and care and mercy didn't give us that thing, we're going to just lay in our beds and we're going to wail out and cry out, but we're not actually crying out to God. We're just crying out in our self-pity. And the prophet Hosea says, if you want God to hear you, you call out to him. And we can call out to him. The reason why any one of us, and that's been me, can be tempted to this kind of self-pity kind of cry and grief is because suffering is so inherently isolating. Have you noticed that through all the challenges that our countries has experienced, there's been these just over top of it, there's been all this divide, and you might experience something one way and somebody very close to you may experience it a different way. And everyone has a different experience of this because we have different makeups. And all of a sudden what ends up happening is we feel like we're the only ones experiencing it, and we withdraw, we pull back, and we pull back to ourselves and we begin isolating. And what ends up happening is that it adds to the suffering. It multiplies the suffering. And that's why Joel calls us to the next piece there. He says, first, we need to awaken to it. We need to lament. We need to build certain practices into our lives. I'll talk about a few of those in a moment. But the third thing he says is gather. He says, gather together. In the passage we used, he says, come together. summon the elders, gather the people together. Let's all come together. Part of healing from something like this is we need to come together and support each other in right ways. Let me continue on with the physical injury illustration. Like I said, I've turned my ankle 1,000 times on a basketball court. Well, maybe not 1,000. A lot. So anyway, but yeah, I turn it, next thing you know, it swells up, and I think I can play for a little bit, and I think it's going to be fine. Next thing you know, I come home, and I'm like in so much pain, and Kathleen's like, what are you doing? Anyway, so, but you know what they say, when you turn your ankle, what do? It's the RICE acronym, right? For the 4 letters are RICE. R for rest, I for ice, C for compression, and E for elevation. You do those 4 things and things are going to get better. I want us to think about that when it comes to us emotionally. 2020 has been hard. We've been rocked. And like, we need to name that and recognize that. When things open up, and things are opening up as I speak, we can't just go off and run off and pretend that like things aren't hard. We just can't run off and go into everything. Like, we need to rest. When things are hard, when you've lost a loved one or you've lost a relationship, you just don't run off and make decisions. You know the story. Like, when you break up with somebody, you just don't jump into the next relationship. Some kind of rest needs to occur. Ice. This is a little bit of a stretch, but bear with me. Like, just like ice helps the swelling go down, we need to cool ourselves off when we've been emotionally heated up. We need to cool ourselves off. We cool ourselves off with words and thoughts. We get ourselves thinking rightly about the situation. Like, okay, and there's 2 ways that I cool myself off. I lament and I write. I write and I get the pain out. I write them out, or I talk them out. And then I get right thinking. I make sure that the people who are talking to me are rational people who aren't going to accelerate the drama or accelerate the pain. And I get them to speak truth to me. We need to cool things off with ice. C is compression. When our hearts are swelling with pain, like my ankle would swell up, you know what you do with your ankles? You wrap that thing. Because my body can't hold it in anymore. Well, the same thing happens to us emotionally. When we start swelling with pain, we need to bring people around us to wrap ourselves with people, with safe people who can be the strength when we don't have the strength, be the hope when we don't have the hope, be the trust when we don't have the hope, be the ones who can listen and be demonstrations of God's grace and patience for us as they help us get out of what's inside of us. And they become strong around us. We need compression, or otherwise our heart will just kind of continue to swell and then cause more damage because of the swollenness of it. And then E, you elevate. Like, so typically speaking, with my ankle, I just have to elevate it, right? Well, when you've been wounded, it's okay. And when we're dealing with a national wound like we're looking at now, it's okay to elevate the issue. It's a right thing to elevate the issue. We should hold it special and think about it and give it special attention. Why? Because it's an injury. Think what happens if I don't address the injury to my ankle. Eventually, it's not going to get better. It's going to cause foot pain. That's already happened to me. It can cause knee problems, hip problems, back problems. Next thing you know, you're getting headaches. And why? Because the body hasn't taken care of itself. And because the body's not taking care of one part of it, the whole body's starting to hurt. Well, can we admit that to be true about our racial situation? As a nation, we've just kept running and running to the next Instagram moment, the next Instagram moment, the next awesome thing, the next awesome thing, the next awesome thing, while a portion of our community has been suffering in ways that we have been unwilling to pay attention to. We have been unwilling to awaken to. And maybe COVID-19 has given us the time to stop. We don't have sports to distract us. We don't have things to go to distract us. And all of a sudden, when these things come out and emerge and point to certainly terrible things when it comes to the issue between among police officers. And hear my heart. I have family members who are police officers. I have family members who are black. So and I love them and I respect them, and I know these issues are much bigger than these particular moments. But when we start seeing that these big issues start emerging, can we elevate them? Can we pay attention? Can we listen to these moments? The fundamental thing we do is that we have to move towards other people. We have to move towards other people and either be the compression for other people or allow other people to hold us tight. We want to do this as a church. Just like Joel teaches, we're going to gather a sacred assembly or a solemn fast. And we want to invite our entire church to pray and to skip some meals on Tuesday into Wednesday and to fast so that we can be more spiritually attentive to what God would want to say. And come together online and on a Zoom call on Wednesday and pray. Pray for our friends, pray for our community, and pray for our nation. And we're going to do that on noon on Wednesday. And I ask that even now, would you look at your schedule and if you can't fast from food, fast from media, fast from your phone or technology. Take a fast in some way to remind us of our need of God. And would you come together with us so that we can call out to God and ask for his mercy and his grace? The other thing I'm going to invite you to do between now and then, after some time today, will you go and find yourself a stone like this? At Easter, Walter, our director of worship, gave us an opportunity to have a guided walk from Good Friday to Easter. And part of it was picking up a stone. Would you pick up a stone sometime today and put it in your pocket? As a reminder that there's sin and burdens that people in our community bear that we don't understand. And would you keep it in your pocket all the way until Wednesday? We'll let you know what to do with it on Wednesday. We put it in your pocket as a reminder that there are others who bear burdens that we know not of and we don't understand. And kids, I'd encourage you to do that. And you know, like if you're 13 years old and you wear shorts all day, put in your shorts and put in those pockets and see if we can carry that. In this way, remind us that those who suffer do not need to suffer alone. So we awaken, we lament, we gather, and we hope. We hope. Our passage ends with the call to cry out to the Lord, and we are going to do that on Wednesday. We will do that today, but it also points us forward to our hope. Remember the locust that stole so much from the people of Israel, or the people who continue to live in the land after the Babylonian captivity? I want you to hear what Joel, the prophet, comes to them and promises them. And this is a promise that we can trust in as well. The Lord said to the people, he says, I will repay you the years the locusts have eaten, the great locust and the young locust, the other locust and the locust swarm. You will have plenty to eat until you will full, and you will praise the name of the Lord your God, who has worked wonders among you, and never again will my people be shamed. The years the locust has eaten will be restored. That is a tremendous promise that we can call out to God for. And God fulfilled that promise. The Israelites were restored. Psalm 126 tells their story. He said, when the Lord restored the fortunes of Zion, we were like those who dreamed. Our mouths were filled with laughter, our tongues with songs of joy. Then it was said among the nations, the Lord has done great things for them. The Lord has done great things for us, and we are filled with joy. Now I want you to see how hope not just fulfilled promises for them that we can trust in, but it gave them wisdom. I want you to listen to the wisdom of what the exiles learned. says, those who sow with tears will reap with songs of joy. Those who go out weeping, carrying seed to sow, will return with songs of joy, carrying sheaves with them. You need to know, as we suffer through the different challenges that we are going to face in 2020, there will be weeping. But there's going to be times where we're going to need to take that bag out and sow it. And sow seed with tears in our eyes. One of my favorite things in the world has been coaching basketball. When I coach my daughters, I particularly love to coach the 6th and 7th grade girls. You know why? Because I knew I could win half my games. How was I going to win half my games? By teaching my girls to be bold and aggressive. Because these are 6th and 7th grade girls. And if our team was an average team and we were more aggressive, we could probably beat the other average team. But I'll never forget the times that sometimes I send them out there to be bold and aggressive, and the other girls are bold and aggressive back. And I call a timeout, and they come back with their tears. They come back in tears that she was being mean to me. And sometimes they need to sit down. But most of the time I'd say, I know she was being mean to you, but go back out there and be strong. And in tears, she said, okay, coach. And they went out there and those girls overcame. Why? They learned to be bold. They learned to be strong. Even when the girls were mean to them, they learned to be strong. And could that be true of us? That in the difficulties of 2020, we are going to have to pause and we're going to have to mourn. We're going to have to grieve. But there's going to be times where we're going to need to pick up that bag and go out there with tears in our eyes and sow our seeds. And the promise to God is this. That, if we will choose to turn to him, he will heal us. And there's going to be times where that as we turn to him for healing, he's going to say, pick up that bag and go out there with your tears. And we can be hopeful of a great harvest. You know, Jesus is the true man of sorrows. He knows this. He went into the harvest field in tears. He went to the cross in tears. He said, my God, why have you forsaken me? But he knows our pain. He knows our sadness. He knows the difficulties of any human in this world. But he also knows our path. He knows our path forward because he has been through death and the resurrection. So Jesus, he can weep with you in your pain. He knows your pain and he knows your path. You know, as we come to him, we know we can heal if we will learn to deal. Coming to him, awakening to the struggles, lamenting them, gathering with one another and moving forward in hope, we can know that he can give us the healing as we trust him to deal. Let's pray together. God, we thank you for every good gift you give us. And we recognize that our nation is hurting. God, I pray for everyone, a part of Project 938, everyone who is listening to this message, who has experienced abuse, understands what it means to be a minority. God, as we are feeling that pain afresh, as they feel that pain afresh, may they know your comfort. For those of us who do not understand or have not lived the life of a minority, may we listen well, learn well, and may our voice be voices of encouragement and support. And God, for our nation that struggles with division over these things and COVID-19 and many other things, God, we look to you to be our healer. God, as you teach us to deal, God, would we trust you to heal? We'll look to you for these things in Jesus' name. Amen.